This is going to be just kind of an off-the-cuff review, and here we go. Alright, first I watched the Lego Batman movie. Now, this has been long awaited, pretty much ever since they came out with the Lego movie, and they do a decent job of making the movie about it being Lego to a fault. They do try and play it within the DC universe as well, so they try to straddle that interesting line between making it a DC movie and also making it a Lego movie. And there's a difference. A Lego movie can be kind of funny, silly, action-packed, but it's like silly action, it's goofy action, it's action that you don't mind children seeing. And they are actually really careful about not showing graphic violence. Okay? So if you're worried about your kids seeing too much graphic violence, here's a good example. One fight scene takes place behind a sort of X-ray screen. Although it's obviously not an X-ray screen, it's obvious that they just kind of used like skeleton Legos and put that in like a glow-in-the-dark thing so that they could make it look like it was skeletons being X-rayed, which was really a clever point. But it was also a way that they were able to show Batman and Robin beating up some guards at Arkham Asylum without it being graphically violent. So it's really full of a lot of creativity like that, and I enjoyed it. And I think you will too. It's long, but it doesn't feel too long. The character of Batman goes on a journey within himself and learns an important lesson by the end. It's not in canon with the DC universe because it has a bit more of a different origin for Robin, Batgirl, all that other stuff. But it's a good message. You'll like it. You'll enjoy it. Your kids will like it, even if it's a little bit corny. In terms of its message, which is just, you can't do it alone, you have to have family and friends and everyone else by your side. So it's a good message though, and it's not a hurtful film. So I will say this, in terms of family-friendly entertainment, it's surprisingly good. You're actually going to have a lot of fun watching it, even though it's like kid fare. You're not going to feel necessarily like you're watching kid fare. There's a lot of self-referential stuff. They bother to make the most fun out of the 1966 show, but even then, it's tongue-in-cheek, but also they do treat it as proper Batman. And remember that when that 1960s Batman first came out, it was the top show on television. And people didn't think that a Batman or any kind of show like that could really be for anyone other than kids, because you had George Reeves in his role back in, like, I think it was the 50s. He played TV's Superman. And that was the only real superhero show that had been on the air over those years. Before that, you had serials, and even then, those serials that came before the movies and stuff were for kids. It wasn't really treated as adult fare. So they do talk then about the role of the 90s Batman characters, and I'm including Batman 89 in that because it was just on the cusp. Kids who grew up in the 90s grew up with the Michael Keaton Batman as their first impression of Batman. So yeah, that was what I grew up with anyway. And I started elementary school in 1989, so yeah, I'm old. Anyway, so yeah, this one, it basically plays it as all of those Batman exist in the same continuity within the Lego sphere. The Justice League makes a brief cameo, but it's not really the focus. The focus is on Gotham characters. And you're going to have some interesting cameos for bad guys. Like, they actually point out just how many villains Batman actually has beyond just the Joker and Bane and the Riddler and Catwoman and all the ones we've seen before 100 times. So I liked that. They pointed out that some of these villains really were stupid in terms of their origins. And a lot of those are actually due to what's called the Silver Age comic books, where you had characters like Crazy Quilt and Zebra Man and all these other characters. In the 1940s, when you have what's kind of your golden age comic books, you have more mafia characters, where Batman's a detective. Anyway, they don't really emphasize that, and they mostly just go for the more cartoony villains, the costumed villains. And that's a bit of a shame, because, but it's integral to the plot, because there's a plot development where the Joker conspires to, basically give Batman nothing to do, to where then he's going to go and get the Phantom Zone projector, and that's your basic plot device for the movie, is the Phantom Zone projector. So there's going to be a little bit of expanded DC lore, but it's nothing that most of us are unfamiliar with. Anyway, hopefully you'll have a good time with it. You might have to explain a couple of things to the kids, but generally they explain stuff pretty well within the context of the movie. So as long as people pay attention, they'll get it all. It's not going to be like that one scene in The Incredibles where you have Edna Mode and she's introduced blankly, and then finally Mr. Incredible says that she used to design suits for the superheroes. And I literally had someone asking me while I was watching it, on DVD. I literally had someone asking me, "Who's she?" just as it was being explained who she was. And I was like, You're finding out right now. And it drove me nuts, because I was like, now I've got to say it to you again, what she just said. But I said, you just missed it. They just explained who she was. Because some people, they just can't let something unfold. I don't know. It really got to me. Because I was like, I can see it coming. I can see the question mark forming above her head. Leave me alone. Let me watch this movie. Because it's my favorite Pixar movie. And it actually has a similar theme to this one, which is you can't go it alone. That was like the theme of The Incredibles, but I think The Incredibles did it better, to be honest. This one, they kind of hammered in a lot. And in The Incredibles, it was more subtle. It was more of a developed story where they didn't go over the top with it. And I hope that when they make The Incredibles 2, coming in the next couple of years, that it's equally as good. But yeah, Lego Batman, they really hammer home the message. It's like, you can't do it alone. You have to have your friends and your family there with you. And it's like, okay. So yeah. And while it's enjoyable, that message keeps getting repeated over and over, and it's more that Batman is really pig-headed about it. So you can sort of just check that out for yourself. Now for the bigger sort of contention, and I would normally do like an angry review of this as soon as it came out on DVD or whatever, and I could like get you some clips from it, but Disney's live-action Beauty and the Beast. Okay, it need be said that there is no reason to do live-action adaptations of any of this. It is literally everything you've seen before. They add some additional stuff, like additional songs, a little bit added to some of the musical numbers that you love, like, the Gaston number notably had a few details. There's some unrealistic aspects, like people are a mile outside of town and then suddenly they're in town. So they just, apparently, this one way into town where there's no road, people can just be on this high hill right outside of the village and then be inside again. Okay. But aside from that whole teleporting aspect, let's actually get into the nuts and bolts of the story. Rather than telling you the sort of preamble story, the prelude through stained glass, which I thought was beautiful and artistic, they actually decided to go with a live-action interpretation. Now, this would be fine, except that they didn't bother actually having the dialogue even mouthed by the characters. So, like, the crone shows up at the door and she just bursts in. She doesn't come knocking. She bursts in the door. And, you know, the storm comes in and all this commotion happens. All the candles blow out, basically. And so the dramatic moonlight is on the prince and the crone. Well, I did like the fact that they actually had the prince be older, like an actual adult, maybe a teenager. There are some different aspects to this film in terms of toxic masculinity that do need to be addressed. First off, I liked what they did with Maurice in terms of they kept him a toy maker, but they did make Belle like his apprentice. Kevin Kline is really good as Maurice. And you don't notice that it's Kevin Kline, you're focusing more on the character because Kevin Kline's a good actor. He doesn't make it, oh, I'm Kevin Kline, look at me. No, he's the character. And that comes from being trained in the art of acting. Anyway, enough about the process, but there does need to be some elements discussed about toxic masculinity in this film, because it's brought up, but it's not quite brought up in a constructive way. Okay, so nutshell time. Let's shrink it down. Let's condense it. Gaston is basically a stalker at this point. I'm not even kidding you. They make sure to hammer home that he is creepy, that he doesn't really know Belle. Now, in my personal life, I've approached women to try and get to know them better, and when they clearly aren't interested in getting to know me at all, I just kind of shrug that off and walk away. And I just try and treat them decently and respectfully. I still don't get that because, I still don't get that in return because it's like, okay, I just said hello. In one case, I actually had a person say to me, she said, I said, oh, that's why we're such good buddies, because we had something in common. And she was like, how do you mean buddies? I'm like, as in pals? Chums? This wasn't an odd concept. At any rate, in this instance, Gaston is presuming a lot. He assumes everybody wants him. He assumes that he can just impose himself on women and they will do whatever he wants. He wants Belle because she doesn't want him back. It's a really messed up kind of thing, but they allude to the fact that Gaston served in the military in a war. Now, it's impossible to know which war because this was Imperial France, or not Imperial France, but Royal France, basically. And Royal France was complicated. There is a joke at this point in the story, because beginning during the Bonjour number, and they say she has a certain, and LeFou says, je ne sais quoi, and Gaston says, I don't know what that means. Now, you might think, oh, that's funny because they're in France and je ne sais quoi is a French saying. Yes, I speak some French. Anyway, so je ne sais quoi literally means I don't know what. And the joke here is, oh, well, they're in France, so they should speak French. No. Up until the time of the French Revolution, French was not the standard language. French was not spoken as commonly as we would think. Okay? That's because French was largely based on Latin, which was mostly taught to the nobility and academics and members of the priesthood. It was a sort of Gaul version of Latin that had a little bit more smoothness to it by softening some of the sounds, putting consonant and vowel together a little bit more often, and putting a soft consonant with another so that it could flow better. Like instead of franquet or franc or any of the other languages, because the French are a subset of Germanic people. Anyway, instead of that, they go français, le France. Even that ending in the pronunciation of le or la is a consonant vowel, and then whatever is to follow is a consonant. That's part of the aesthetic. At any rate, linguistics aside, it's important to note that there were actually several sub-languages of subcultures within the greater France. So several of those languages disappeared over time, but your different regions would speak a few different languages besides just French. French was simply a more common language among many tradespeople of higher rank, or certain administrators. They would speak French because French was what was spoken in Paris. So it's not necessarily that much of a joke that a rural, illiterate hunter who served in the military wouldn't know what je ne sais quoi means. He probably, if he was in the military, was just a low-level private, just a ground soldier, and he probably didn't, learn much French besides what was given in orders. Anyway, all of that aside, so a big elephant in the room right away, as soon as you start with the bonjour number, is Emma Watson, rather. Emma Thompson is in the film as Mrs. Potts, and she's wonderful. But Emma Watson's singing. Oh my God, where to start? First off, I love Emma Watson, and I don't mean just in that way. I mean, I respect her, and I admire a lot of what she's chosen to do with her life and her millions of dollars from residuals from Harry Potter. She went, got a degree, was very accomplished in school. I respect that, and she chose to be an outspoken feminist. Way to go. All that aside, it's important to kind of note that they auto-tune the ever-living heck. I was trying to choose a good word, and I don't want to curse, but point is, they choose to auto-tune her voice so much when she sings that opening note, and I think it's purely because the actress who originally sang it was also the voice of Ariel. They literally just had that actress go from one role to the next, and she was a very talented voice actress, and she had a very powerful control over her pitch. So when she sang, she was able to sing very melodically with a great deal of style and gravitas, so that you were listening to it. I'm guessing that Emma Watson probably hasn't had much vocal training. Apparently at some point in the Harry Potter franchise, they taught her how to do a movie scream, which is the way up in the head kind of whistling scream, the ah! Anyway, so that's fun, but you need to actually know how to sing. And when she sings, you can tell it's auto-tuned because everything is as if it's being hit by a keyboard. Da 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 da. And I can't even do it because my voice is too organic. I have that little bit of time where I need to kind of find the note a little bit. I'm not as practiced. But yeah, you could just tell it was that uncanny valley kind of auto-tune where it's just da 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 da. And even then, when I try and do it like really fast like that, I don't get it quite right. I still slide a bit too much when trying to get the note. And people don't have mechanical voices like that. It sounded tinny. So I was just like, what is going on with this? And after listening to it enough, I was like, okay, maybe Emma Watson can't sing. Maybe she can sing, but she's like not that good a singer. Here's the thing, if you're going to do that with a story that takes place in France, why wouldn't you have done that with Russell Crowe back in Les Miserables? And I'm over. It's just, I understand. The problem was he was singing way too much in his head, and it's hard to get control when you're doing that. Yes, I'm trained in vocal singing. Anyway, point is, they could have given her some voice lessons, and they could have given her the control and taught her to sing from her abdomen, from her diaphragm, just under her lungs, where the breadbasket is. If you sing from there, or if you speak from there, you can be clearly heard, understood, and have a better sense of control with your vocal cords. This is me putting you to school a little bit. Some people don't know this, so it's important to talk about it. And when watching this, it's a little bit hard to appreciate the effort that she probably went through because of the auto-tuning, and it's really bad. I mean, it's bad auto-tuning where it doesn't sound organic. And you can tell that she's putting in the effort. You can tell that she is trying. She is trying to put in the acting. And at first when I saw her, I swore it was Kristen Stewart, just because of the makeup that they had done on her. I was like, they don't look alike, so why do they look alike? Like, they don't have that similar face, but the way they made her up made her look a lot like Kristen Stewart, and I think Emma Watson is prettier. I also think Emma Thompson is prettier, but that's because I have a profound respect for Emma Thompson, especially having watched her personal writing and directing debut of Sense and Sensibility. I think she directed it as well. And she was excellent in it. Anyway, enough about Emma Thompson. I love Emma Thompson with a righteous love. Anyway, so all that aside, it's kind of fun to watch because you know that part's auto-tuned and everyone else is really giving it. And there are so many people in this film who clearly have some excellent vocal talent and are really bringing it forth. I wouldn't be surprised if a number of these folks were from, say, the stage show. For those who don't know, they've been doing a Beauty and the Beast stage show up in Toronto for decades now. They may have stopped doing the show because of waning audience numbers, but I went to see it. Oh man, how far back was that? That was the late 90s. Mid-90s. We'll say mid-90s. Anyway, point is, that show, excellently done. I've also seen The Phantom up there. Excellently done. Toronto has some excellent performers. So does Cleveland. So I think that's one reason why I appreciated it. All that being said, yeah, you're going to love the musical numbers in this. They do a decent job. Even Ewan McGregor, who despite being Scottish is able to put forth a decent French accent, which is troubling. Like, I just imagine Groundskeeper Willie, teaching French. Bonjour, you cheese-eating surrender monkeys! Right? I actually had a Russian French instructor, thick accent, who taught us French. Anyway. Point is, Ewan McGregor does a decent job. Oh crap, what is his name? Ian McKellen. Ian McKellen does a really good job as Cogsworth. You don't think he's going to do that good a job, but the thing about Sir Ian, the thing about him is he is a veteran actor. So when he's playing the role, you're not thinking that's Sir Ian McKellen. You might notice it, just because he has a very unique voice, the way that he talks. One of my favorite things that he's ever done was the reading of this poem that is in the middle of the bridge for Invisible Light by the Scissor Sisters. If you haven't listened to that song, it's amazing. And Sir Ian thought that it was actual Shakespeare because of just the classical imagery that it conveyed. Sir Ian does an excellent job. You're focusing on him as the character, as Cogsworth. So it's not Gandalf as Cogsworth or Magneto as Cogsworth. It's Cogsworth. However, Ewan, while he does a really good job, I have to give it to him. He is singing his heart out in this. He is giving it his all. There is not a bad performance in this film. Nobody is putting in a halfway measure or phoning it in like you see in some things. And they really went for the star power on this one, so it was really impressive. Ewan sings in his head when he sings. And this was something I noticed back with Moulin Rouge. Ewan sings in his head. He goes way up high in his head like this. And it doesn't work. You have to go from the diaphragm. Now maybe his voice is just very reedy. But whenever I've heard him speak, it doesn't tend to be that reedy or thin. I think they tried to get him to drag his voice down a little bit deeper from where he projects. You have to project from the center of your torso, basically. That's where the air has to come from. That's where you have to force it from in order to get a good projection. At any rate, he, of course, takes one of the biggest numbers, Be Our Guest, right? And so you cannot have someone who cannot sing do Be Our Guest. And so I think they worked with him. I think they possibly digitally lowered his register just a little bit. Just a hair. That's important. If you lower that register just a little bit, you get that rich baritone. And I think they did the same thing with the singer and actor who played the Beast. They did a decent job of kind of giving him the rich register closer to a baritone trombone, which is important because baritone is one of the most pleasant sounds in the human voice range. Or haven't you noticed by now? Anyway, so this film was way more enjoyable than I expected. I thought it's going to just be recycled, and I don't like recycling. Anyway, it's a decent film. It's decent quality. You'll enjoy it. Your kids will probably like it, and more importantly, don't compare it to the old one. Don't compare it to the animated one. Because that's the problem, that a lot of people are going to fall. Compare it to the old one. I'm comparing it to the stage show, because that's the live-action version I've seen. The animated version, yeah, they're doing some different stuff. It doesn't matter. This one I'm comparing to the stage show because the stage show had live actors performing. And it was awesome. And some people were like, I was in a group and we were touring around Canada. And some folks were like, oh, can't we go see Phantom? We can just go watch the cartoon on VHS. It's like, it's not the same. If you want to go see Phantom, you can go see Phantom on your own. But anyway. And do go see Phantom, by the way. Phantom of the Opera is one of the best musicals that has been made in the past so many years. I mean, who doesn't know that? I showed it to a friend of mine who loves musicals, and she was like, every song in this is perfect. Every song in this is awesome. How did I not know about this? Anyway, point is, getting back to Beauty and the Beast, and there are some correlations. Okay, there are some correlations in there between the sort of mysterious figure that you don't know about who was kind of cursed to be ugly and the person who sees past that. But in Phantom, it takes a darker tone when it turns out that the Phantom really is crazy and that the Phantom really doesn't care about Christine at all. In Beauty and the Beast, it's completely the opposite. The Beast grows. He cares. One element of this that they indicate, which was not in the animated or the stage version, is they try and put in a bit of an element of toxic masculinity. We come back to that. The idea is that the Beast became this toxic person, this abuser to servants and innocents, because when his mother died, his father apparently took him and tried to toughen him up and purge all that softness out of him. Now there's a bit of an element here that needs to be mentioned. Belle doesn't have a mother, and neither does Beast, or the Prince, however you want to call him. Neither of them have a mother. So, where does that come in with any of this? Why is that important? Because it's a Disney trope. Have you ever noticed that a lot of Disney movies, the protagonist doesn't have a mother? Or they stopped having mothers at a certain point. In Mary Poppins, the kids have a mother. And that's one of the few instances where they do have mothers. I think in Sleeping Beauty, Aurora's mother is not present. The kings are there, but not the mother. In Snow White, it's a wicked stepmother, not a wicked mother. Anyway, and why is this, right? Why is this? Well, apparently, Walt Disney bought a new home for his parents to live in as soon as he was a success. And the house had a gas leak. It had a carbon monoxide leak. Everything in it was brand new, the latest tech, so that they would have a very easy lifestyle. And unfortunately, the heating system was brand new and had a carbon monoxide leak, which ended up killing, I think, his mother, but not his father. It might have killed them both. But anyway, he felt horrible about it for the rest of his life. It was one of his greatest regrets. Because he felt responsible. I mean, there was no way he would know or be able to control it. Frankly, I think if you're going to blame yourself for that, you need some therapy to kind of deal with the grief and acknowledge where culpability lies, because there's no way one is culpable for that. But at any rate, so there's this cliche in Disney films of a dead mother. Every time. Mother's dead. Little Mermaid. There's no mother. What is it? The Great Mouse Detective. The little Scottish mouse has a father, but no mother. A lot of Disney films, there's no mother. It's just the way that they go. And in this instance, that's what happens. The mother dies, and the prince is actually beaten and mistreated by the dad in order to toughen him up. And ends up being very toxic and abusive and hurtful to the young beast when he's still a child. Well, that's supposedly why he's the way he is. He was told, oh, those books are for wimps. You don't need to know about any of that stuff. That's just for wimpy people. You know, you sit around reading books all the time and people will just push you around. And you won't really know anything. And I've gotten that crap from people over the course of my life if I actually bothered to read something or learn something or know something. And people have this bad habit of actually asking you, what are you reading? As if you want to talk about it and not sit there and read your book. Anyway, point is that Beast really hasn't opened up the library and read any of the books. And you have this huge library. And Belle asks, have you read all these books? And he's like, no. So she pulls down some and reads them. And he ends up enjoying them. And he ends up sitting down and reading some himself. And a lot of this movie is actually about literacy. You have a bookseller, but he's not the most popular person in town. He doesn't speak up a lot, but he tries to do the right thing. And one aspect about his character is that he's black. And he's the only black person in the entire village, as far as I can tell. Meanwhile, at the palace, a lot of the guests and some of the characters are women of color. So I kind of questioned that. I was like, they're putting in people of color in a Disney film. Given it's their movie, they can do whatever the heck they want, and given history has been whitewashed. But, you know, were there people of color of nobility and rank and status back then? It's kind of hard to tell. You know, I know, for instance, that Othello was black, and it's one of the few instances where they acknowledge that people of color exist in what could be called Renaissance literature. So it's going to be a bit of a question for you. You know, did they in fact have... Okay, people who don't tune their motorcycles are jerks. If your motorcycle rumbles like that, you need to tune it up. You've tuned it down so that you get that classic rumbling, so that everyone gets annoyed by all the noise you make. Anyway. So the question is, did people of color exist back in the 18th century France? Well, probably. France and Europe, if you haven't noticed, are rather close to Africa. It's kind of just there, just across the Mediterranean. And so there's no reason why people of color would not be in Europe. So, you know, there were the Moors who lived in Spain for quite a long time, and they would have gradually come in and been part of France. So why wouldn't there be people of color? It's just a bit of a question. Because in every other portrayal, we've had nothing but white people. Which is just, you know, what they call whitewashing. So, I would say, fine. It's not really distracting from the story. It's just like, that doesn't match with my earlier concept. And I'm okay with that. It's just like, now that I think about it, there could have been people of color there this whole time. I don't know. It's really difficult because in America we have an institution of racism. At any rate, so what do we actually look at when we're talking about some of this stuff? Sorry. So what do we actually look at? Well, look at the actual story. Look at the acting. The film is pretty good. You actually will enjoy watching it. You'll enjoy seeing some of the different musical numbers, and you'll enjoy the different design that they've taken. They've bothered to make the palace more reflective of the beast, you know, where it looks more like a tangled, gnarled tree. And they bother to actually have this plot device where every time a petal falls, the servants and the beast and the castle become more and more, you know, what they, you know, the castle decays and the people become more like the objects and have a harder time, and the beast becomes more bestial. So it becomes a bit more difficult for them to live. And you wonder, well, like, how far does this go? When they first, you know, the first year, were they just starting to take on some of the traits? Did Lumiere get just slightly a metallic sheen to his skin? Did the beast just start growing a bit more hair on his face and sprout horns? Or was it right away the people were turned into objects? And you don't just get, from that plot device, you really don't just get the, oh, we're objects and, we might just have a problem or whatever. We're miserable as objects and we can't be human. No, you actually get the threat of becoming a dead object for the rest of your life. And one of the saddest parts is actually when Emma Thompson's character of Mrs. Potts goes and is on her trolley and is looking for Chip and can't find him, and she turns into a pot without ever finding him. And then Chip comes for her, and throws himself off of a balcony, and his saucer breaks, and then he's caught at the last minute by the coat tree and placed on the tray, the rolling cart, and then the coat tree stands still because he's turned. And you just feel these people's pain because they're like, we're going to die and we want to live. We don't want to be stuck like this forever. We don't want to be trapped. It conveys this darkness to the particular story that wasn't there in the original. In the original, there was no enchanted objects where they were possessed by the spirits of the servants. That's a Disney invention. But one thing that they did do was kind of just have the beast have these magical objects and magical powers that helped him along the way. So, all that being said, here comes the challenge. Is Beauty and the Beast completely worth your time? You don't have to go out and see it. I'm not going to convey that. It's not a must-see. Because you've seen it before. You really have. Nothing in it is that new. It's not like the Lego Batman movie where it's original writing and they just bother to shove in some pop songs and it kind of has a schmaltzy message. This one, I think they did a little bit better interpretation than the 1991, I think it was, animated version. So I would say maybe go out and check it. Go check it out if you want, but it's not going to ruin your life if you never see it. In terms of some sad moments at the very end, you're gonna be sad. Your kid is gonna be crying. They're gonna be like, "Oh no, they're turning into the objects." And that part is going to be really upsetting for your little ones if they have not seen the story before. So my advice to you would be to kind of say, okay, there might be some scary or some sad stuff in this, so if you want to, just hold my hand and it'll be okay. Yes, I've been around kids a lot. Anyway, so yeah, that would be my advice, is kind of prepare them. Let them know that that's going to be there, if you must. Or if you prefer to have a more emotionally mature child, you can always just kind of talk about things after. And you can say, well, what did you think? Because talking about a movie with your kids is a great way to help them kind of work through it. You don't just have to take them and then, not talk about it. Talking about it with your kids is one of the ways that they emotionally develop. It's one of the ways that you help them process all of this. I mean, for crying out loud, I seem to remember being taken to Die Hard when I was little. I don't know why, but I was told to cover my eyes a lot because there's a lot of blood and violence in that one. And I seem to remember being taken to I seem to remember to being taken to Hunt for Red October as well. So it's just kind of wild. Anyway, yeah. So you can take your kids to more mature movies. It's okay. You just want to double check and make sure that it's not going to have anything that's going to scar them too bad. It can even be rated R. But, you know, it's just kind of questionable. Anyway, so, yeah, this movie won't ruin your child if they never see it. It won't ruin your child if they do see it. It won't ruin you. It's just really kind of a fluff movie. It's recycled from a lot of what you've seen before. You're not missing out if you aren't going to see it. I don't know. So let's do the 5-star rating. Lego Batman will give a 4 out of 5, and Beauty and the Beast, I think we're going to give a 4 out of 5. It's good, but it's recycled, and you lose a star for that. And you also lose that star for not doing enough vocal training with Emma Watson to where she could really sing. I felt really bad for that, because it's like, Emma Watson's a good actress. Emma Watson has, like, talents and everything, but apparently singing is not as much of one of them. Like, apparently she can sing, but it's not, like, stage singing. Like, I'm pretty sure that Emma Thompson can do that. And they actually have, like, an opera singer playing one character in this, and she's really great. And she's a woman of color. So, you know, what else is there? In terms of the Lego Batman thing, 4 out of 5 simply because it's corny, and the pop songs actually annoy the heck out of me. I could do without some of them. There's only 1 or 2 pop songs that I actually appreciate in the film. Like, one is where they have, like, Robin's theme be "Fly, Robin, fly, fly into the sky." You know, that old disco song? Anyway, not a bad gimmick. Go for it, sure. Anyway, yeah. So, Lego Batman gets 4 out of 5, but it's much more on the plus. Beauty and the Beast had to be deducted, whereas Lego Batman, it adds onto from where it started. Because I wasn't that impressed. You're starting with Batman, okay, popular character. You're starting with Lego, popular franchise. And you're just putting it in a kid's film. And they actually managed to make a decent, interesting, entertaining, fun film for the whole family out of that mix of ingredients. This one, with Beauty and the Beast, though, everything's already been proven and tested. It's relying on recognition. There is nothing new really added to the combination, just a couple of additional songs. That's it. That's what you get for your time and trouble. A few new songs, different casting. I'm a little bit sad because I really love Jerry Orbach as Lumiere. He was so good. I also love David Ogden Stiers as Cogsworth. He was very good. And obviously I missed the original Belle. I'm trying not to compare it too much to the original animated, but the problem is, that's where you're starting from, is you're doing a live adaptation of an animated film. So, how is anyone supposed to really process this as anything other than a copy of this original product? Just done in live action. Normally, you would think it would be a reverse. You would think they would have started live action and then done an animated version. They've done that with a lot of different ones, like Batman. A lot of the initial versions were done live action. Then they did a cartoon in terms of, you know, motion picture medium or television medium. Superman, likewise. You had the Fleischer cartoons, and then you had the television broadcast, and yeah. And that's simply because Superman is so fantastic that there's only so much he can actually do in live action without it being lots of special effects. All that being said, this version, not going to be the quintessential version. Still a good version, but difficult to not compare. Oh, another big thing. LeFou, supposed to be gay, you don't get that vibe. Like, he's kind of, close with Gaston. I get more the vibe that he's bi, to be honest. LeFou, it just seems like he's willing to fool around with guys as much as women. I don't get the gay vibe. Like, they have him very happily interacting with women. And at the end, they have him dancing with a guy who earlier got, made up like a woman by one of the enchanted objects, the dresser, right? Anyway, so I mean, that's kind of part of the issue here. It's like, what are we doing here? I just don't get the gay vibe off this. He doesn't show any interest in men. He just ends up dancing with one in a scene that's like a second long. You blink and you missed it. I'm not even kidding you. So, that part was actually one reason why I got kind of like, people are saying he's gay over this. He's not even openly gay. He is no more openly gay than any other, character that is suspected to be gay throughout the entire fictional world that we've set up for every other story. So yeah. I wouldn't go categorizing LeFou as gay any more than anything else. Yeah, my best, I would actually think that Cogsworth was gay far more, but that's just me. And that's not just because Sir Ian McKellen is gay. Let me just get that right out there. Anyway, so yeah. In all, not a bad movie. 4 out of 5, but I had to deduct some. It's closer to 3.5 out of 5 for Beauty and the Beast. Lego Batman, it's 4 out of 5, but because I started from a place of basically where it was 2.5, because it was something I'd seen before, but in this case they managed to build on it enough. So you actually end up having fun. They reimagine the characters in a new and interesting way. And they're not just revising everything that you've seen before. It's not just regurgitation. It's actually an original product with a lot of distinction to it. A lot of... let me put it this way. You could rewatch either, and that's an important factor. You could rewatch them. But of the ones that you would want to rewatch, I think Lego Batman has enough to it that you would find new things to latch onto every time. There would be new elements. And that's kind of a challenge for any story maker. New elements to a story that you didn't notice there. Or as Beauty and the Beast put it, is there something there that wasn't there before? Alright, with that I'm wrapping up this video. If you want to, you can donate to my Patreon campaign. But either way, thanks for watching. And I hope to see you again in the future. And until then, take care. Good luck. Bye-bye.